Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, thank you for being here today. I'm also grateful to our dear colleagues Rajko Kraus and Denčo Botaru, who were kind to invite me to join the session. So, the cultural phenomenon we now know as the Vinča culture, flourishing between 5250 and 4550 before Common Era in what is now Serbia and parts of the Central Balkans, has long held a special place in European prehistory. Since the first discoveries at the eponymous site of Vinča Belo Brdo in the early 20th century, this Neolithic culture has fascinated archaeologists with its scale, sophistication, and material richness. Among its most iconic finds are thousands of anthropomorphic figurines, some stylized, others hauntingly abstract, and majority of them fragmentary. These figurines have been interpreted variously over the decades as deities, toys, ancestors, or ritual objects. Today, Vinča remains not only a cornerstone for understanding Neolithic lifeways in Southeast Europe, but also a methodological frontier for rethinking how we approach fragmented artifacts. The figurines, in particular, challenge our desire for completeness and legibility. Their ambiguity makes them ideal case study for exploring new, ethically grounded approaches to digital reconstruction. Here I want to show how reconstruction based on analyzed traces and credible clues can become a valid form of interpretation rather than mere restoration. I would like to begin with some images of broken figurines buried over 7,000 years, emerging fragment by fragment from the dark soil of southeastern Europe. Figurines have no mouth, their faces are smooth, almost featureless. Their limbs are highly stylized, and bodies abstract but unmistakably human. Fragmented condition of majority of these terracottas is not only the result of millennia in the ground. Many of them, it seems, and some authors propose, were broken deliberately in prehistory. Today, I would like to talk about how we might reconstruct these figurines, not only physically, but also conceptually. What does it mean to restore a body that was broken with intention? What does it mean to visualize a form that was never meant to be whole in the modern sense? Let me first address the challenge of reconstruction in the digital age. Thanks to 3D scanning, photogrammetry, and printing, we now have the tools to document and eventually restore objects with extraordinary precision. But with that power comes responsibility. Are we simply mending what time has broken? Or are we creating new versions of the past? The Vinča figurines challenge us because they resist completeness. Their forms are ambiguous. They lack facial features, they often lack clear sex markers, and many are fragmentary even when they are whole. Any attempt at reconstruction, therefore, risks projecting modern assumptions onto prehistoric ambiguity. However, what we need, apparently, is a theoretical framework that embraces uncertainty. Here, I turn to the work of Ruth Ringham and Margaret Conkey, who proposed the idea of the life history of an object. The idea that artifacts have biographies, they are created, used, transformed, and sometimes ritually discarded. From this perspective, a fragment is not a failure. It is a phase in the life of an object. To simply glue it back together or recreate its parts in order to produce seamless whole might actually erase a key part of its biography. And so, any reconstruction must be careful, reflexive, and above all, honest about what it cannot know. And this presents us with a profound dilemma. Which story, then, is it more important for us to tell? The story of the object's unique life, its journey, its intentional breaking? Or is it the story of the artisan's skill, the aesthetic pleasure of seeing the figure as it might once have been, whole and unbroken? Is the biography of a single piece more sacred than a glimpse into the artistry, the canons, and the tastes of a lost world? This brings me to the ethical dimension. 3 major documents shape the international conversation on reconstructions: the Venice Charter of 1964, the Nara document on authenticity, 1994, and the London Charter for the computer-based visualization of cultural heritage of 2009. All 3 agree on a central principle: reconstructions must be distinguishable from original and must not mislead the viewer. The London Charter goes further, urging transparency in digital interventions and traceability of all sources. In my own work with Vinča figurines, I have attempted to follow these principles by marking reconstructed parts with subtle texture differences or color shifts, and by providing documentation of each interpretive decision. But even this may not be enough. For viewers unfamiliar with prehistoric art, the distinction between original and reconstructed parts can still be unclear. This is why education must accompany visualization. We must explain that reconstructions are proposals, not truths. Visualizations should therefore be considered as ways of thinking with the material, not getting final answers. We are not restoring an original form, we are offering a dialogue between past and present. And of course, point clearly to the viewer, to that magical revert to the original or before and after button. Another key point is methodological constraint. We must decide in advance what kinds of data we will accept as the basis for reconstruction. In my approach, I accept only evidence that is archaeologically secure, stylistically compatible, and chronologically contemporaneous. For example, if a figurine torso was found in a stratified Vinča layer dated to phase B1, I will certainly not attach a head from phase C, even if it fits physically. Style and time matter. Moreover, we must avoid the temptation of idealization. The human brain loves symmetry, but prehistoric art does not always comply. Many figurines are asymmetrical, awkward, even grotesque by modern standards. That is part of their meaning. When it comes to the modern lens through which we interpret the past, the so-called Vidovdanka figurine is a case apart. Undeniably Neolithic in origin, it was first misdated to the era of archaic Greece upon its discovery. Its popular name, meanwhile, reaches not to prehistory but to a romanticized memory of Serbia's medieval past. Let me now turn to a case study: hair and headdress. One of the recurring motifs in Vinča figurines is the presence of elaborate top knots, horn-like projections, and headgear. In some cases, these are unmistakably present on the fragment, in others they must be inferred. When reconstructing such features, we must ask, do similar decorations appear on other artifacts from the same site and horizon? Do we find parallels in contemporaneous figurines from other sites? In my reconstructions, which I am presenting here, I use a system of graded plausibility. Certain elements are labeled as archaeologically attested, others are stylistically plausible, and others are purely hypothetical. The user can toggle layers on and off, making the interpretive process visible and interactive. I will present several reconstructions that I believe will be of interest not only to archaeologists, but also to wider cultural audience. These examples offer a fresh look at the possible appearance of selected Vinča figurines and the few vessels that combine human or animal figures. There is an interesting anthropomorphic vase with a human face on its neck. It was found in a bright orange tone, indicating secondary burning. In contrast, the preferred colors of Vinča pottery, as we know, were dark brown, black, or deep gray, achieved through reduction firing. For this reconstruction, I have adjusted the vessel's color to match those typical hues, allowing us to imagine its original appearance and better appreciate the refinement of Vinča artistry. When it comes to the archaeological evidence for reconstructing hairstyles, three main approaches can be observed. The first involves a number of figurines with incised lines which represent hair. They start from the top of the head, sometimes from the forehead, running down the back, often below the shoulders. In many cases, traces of red pigment remained in these grooves, identified as cinnabar or iron oxide. The second group of figurines have tiny perforations on the back of the head or above the forehead, also retaining similar pigments. If our aim is to reconstruct the life biography of a figurine, we must try to decode the meaning and function of perforations executed on it. These openings are neither random nor merely decorative. Rather, they were created with a deliberate purpose that had a specific role in the object's own life cycle. That purpose may have been practical, symbolic, aesthetic, or ritual, but in every case it forms an integral part of the narrative the figurine carries. In this light, the act of making perforations is no less significant than the act of breaking or destroying the figurine at the end of its life cycle. They are both significant moments in the object's biography, from the moment of its creation to the moment of its transformation or end of use. The third group involves shaped attachment point at the back where hair could have been fixed with ribbon or adhesive. One of the most compelling pieces of archaeological evidence for the use of cinnabar in decorating hairstyles comes from tiny fragments of this material recovered during flotation process. These finds originate from residential horizon at Vinča itself. They are so small, minute tubular pieces, no more than 1 or 2 millimeters in size, each with a perforation running through the center, a feature that could not have been created by any tool. This strongly suggests that they were formed when soft paste-like cinnabar, or iron oxide paste, was applied directly to strands of hair, from which these tiny fragments eventually loosened and fell during wear. What emerges from this process is not a finished sculpture, but a visual argument. Each reconstructed figurine becomes a proposition about how bodies were imagined, represented, and transformed in Neolithic Southeast Europe. In my previous research, I noted that figurines embody a striking duality in the way they represent individuality and identity. While their facial features are rendered with minimal detail, their garments often carry complex ornamentation executed through fine incisions and pigments. When considered the possibility of diverse hairstyles, likely an integral aspect of these figurines, the sense of individuality becomes even more pronounced, moving the representations closer to portraiture and offering us additional clues for interpreting their original meaning and function.